Hi, our guest today is Christopher Pilla. Chris is the treasurer for Milford, a position he's held since August of 2015. My co-host Al Holman is not here today. Chris, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I want to talk to you about the $28 million bond issue that the town just did successfully. I mean, I know if I'm going to borrow money from a bank, chances are they want to see that I'm employed.
Yep.
If I'm self-employed, they might want to look at my tax return. They want to know if I have any collateral. What does somebody look at when a city or town wants to borrow $28 million?
So they're basically going to look at our audited financials. They're going to dig deep into the town's reserves, the town's existing debt, any new growth we see coming, the town's demographics. They're going to look at all those before they give their legal opinion or their professional opinion to give us a bond rating.
Okay.
And based on that bond rating, companies in the financial industry will bid on the $28 million loan. And,
okay, so unlike my analogy, if I go to a bank looking for a loan, these guys are actually coming to you because someone has told them you're going to borrow $28 million from them.
Right. It actually is a bidding process. They're sent all our financials in advance, our rating from Moody's Investments, our legal opinion from Lock and Lord. They're sent that probably a month in advance, so their analysis gets done, and then they have a bid date that they have to submit their bids by.
So they basically decide, hey, I want to go for that.
Right.
I want to give them my money.
Right.
Because they're very good at paying it back.
Right.
Okay, now how does the bond rating get done?
So the bond rating is done by an investment company. We use Moody's investment service.
And Milford has a capital A, small a, 1 rating.
Capital A, small a, 2.
2, okay, rating.
And basically, because of the demographics of our town, it's going to be a little bit difficult for us to jump up to the next category of the bond rating. But a capital A, lowercase a, double A2 we call it, is pretty good. When we went out to bid, because of our rating, we had about 10 bidders for the $28 million.
Okay, now does the town select then the winning bid?
Yep.
Okay.
Myself, Zach Taylor, our finance director,
right,
and our bond counsel at Unibank. Unibank takes in all the bids, and then our advisor calls myself and Zach, and we discuss all 10 of them.
Okay.
And from that, we choose the best.
Now, something else that's interesting. The company selected actually paid the town a premium to be chosen.
Yep.
So in other words, if I've got this right, they gave the town over $1 million so that we would pick them.
Yep.
Okay, how much exactly did you get?
So we got about a net bond premium of about $1.5 million.
Okay, so the town borrowed. Bonds are just another form of borrowing. So the town borrowed $28 million.
Yep.
But really got $29.5 million.
Yep.
But you're only paying interest on the 28.
Correct. So we could use the premium in several different ways. I said the 1.5 was the net, so we had already paid off our issuance cost of the bond, about $150,000 for that.
Right.
That's all the different companies that worked on our rating, our legal opinion,
right,
our advisor, obviously.
Right, because unlike me walking into the bank and filling out an application, you guys have a lot of paperwork and a lot of cost associated with that.
Right.
Okay.
And you also, if you went to go take out a mortgage, for example, you will have...
Yes, you have those stacks of paper to, and all the little checks you write at the end.
Right, and a cost to that. It's either added on to your mortgage or you pay it up front.
Right.
So a bond premium kind of comes from what the markets are doing. A bond premium is usually given when the coupon rate of the bond is higher than the prevailing interest rates, current interest rates.
So if I put $100 in a bank, I'm lucky to get, what, 1%, 2% interest on it?
Probably 0.1, but.
Okay. And the bond rates are higher.
Right, you're looking at, between 3 and 5%.
Okay, which we're paying in interest.
Yep.
Okay, now, I'm just trying to get this explained into layman's terms because most of the people that watch this aren't government junkies or
Yeah.
financial people. So, in essence, it was Fidelity.
Yep, Fidelity Capital Markets.
Is that part of the big Fidelity?
Yeah, they're an existing subsidiary
Okay.
of Fidelity.
So Fidelity Capital Markets, in essence, offered a premium amount of money so that Milford would pick them.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, with the 28 million borrowed, there were some bond anticipation notes that were
Yep.
taken out. Are they now paid off?
One is paid off. We paid off the first one, $6 million. We have our $17 million bond anticipation note that we took out in September when I first got here. That's due July 1st.
And that will be paid off with the...
With the proceeds we got from the 28 million. So what's really happening is the band, we call them a band, the bond
Right.
anticipation notes are your short-term notes. They're
Right.
usually a year long. This bond that we just took out for 28 million is now going to be over 20 years.
Right, but 17 million of that 28 million will go to pay off the bond
Yep.
anticipation note,
Right.
which leaves somewhere around 10 million that can go towards, is that the real long-term? Well, you're borrowing the 28 million,
Yep.
but that's the amount you really need
Yeah.
to...
The remaining amount of the 28 million is still going to have to pay for the remaining amount of the school work that needs to be done. We're still going to have bills coming in.
Right.
So that's where we come up with the 28 million.
And then you don't start paying the bond off until when?
Our first payment, first interest payment is actually November of 2016.
Okay.
Our first principal payment is going to be May of 2017.
So you've got time to wrap up the school and
Yep.
know the true cost to the town and
Right.
do that. Now, the other question I wanted to ask is you got something called a blended interest rate.
Yep.
So you said bonds are paying 3 to 5%. Now I notice in some years we're paying 3%,
Mhm.
some years we're paying 5%.
Yep.
Is the blended rate the average of all 20 years of paying it back?
Right. So each year has a different interest rate, and what the bonding company will do for us, and even the bidders on the bond, they'll come up with their schedule, and they'll pick the different rates, and they'll give us a true interest cost or true
Right.
interest number. And that's about 2.4 in this case. And that's
Okay.
taking in the 20 interest rates for each year, less the bond premium that we got.
Okay.
So that's where when we,
So the town will make the same payment every time a payment's due, even if the interest rate is 3 one year and 5 the next?
no, the bond principal will be the same every year. The interest is going to fluctuate based off what that bond interest rate is. So
Okay. So what I'm trying to get at is, do you have the same predictable payment every period of time over the 20 years?
no, we don't.
So 1 year, if it jumps from 3 to 5%,
Yep, you're
the
paying
payments
5.
might be higher that year.
Yep.
If it goes back 2 years later to 3%, the payments drop
Right.
again.
Yep.
It's hard to budget for then, isn't it?
It is, but what we
But
get,
you know the schedule.
yeah, we get the schedule immediately after we award the bid to the bonding company. So,
Okay.
you
Now,
know,
let's jump back to that AA2 rating. What is Moody's Investor Service, no relation to Town Council Jerry Moody?
Yeah.
What does Moody's ask you guys to do or provide for information?
so like I said before, we have to provide our audited financials,
Right.
as well as they send over a 30-page document that has questions, comments about all the town's financials. It goes into all the contracts the town has with the different unions.
It's that specific.
It's that specific. It asks for our top 10 taxpayers, commercial taxpayers, any new growth that we see coming. And then it also goes into the OPEB liability, talks about that a little bit.
Just for the audience, that's the other
The post-employment,
post-employment things.
benefits. Yep.
That's more like retirement benefits for
Yep.
retired employees.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So after we provide this document to them filled out, we then get another questionnaire that comes to us probably a week in advance of our rating call. And our rating call is usually with the assistant vice president of the company that we're working with, in this case Moody's.
Right.
And we talk about the questions, and we go into depth, and they'll usually ask, do we see any other debt coming on in the next 5 years? They'll ask for our 5-year capital plan. Do we have any known tax situations coming up? Like they brought up Staples and Sports Authority, because they're both in our town, and both those companies, could be moving their buildings, may not.
So Sports Authority, although it was after the fact, is now going out of business completely.
Right.
So you're losing that.
Right. So they would look at that as as like almost like a kind of a yellow flag, not even a red flag. But,
right.
That's really what they look at. They look at our reserves, how much we're putting into stabilization.
Which in this case, we're doing quite well.
Right. And
with grand total of a little more than 17 million?
Yep. Right about, no, a little less. Our short term is about 16.3. Okay. And then we have a long-term stabilization that's a little over 2 million, but that's more for capital projects.
So that's pretty healthy.
Yep,
and so Milford's never had to do the what the Finance Committee chairman last week called the swear words of, actually, no, it was the long-term capital guy on the Finance Committee, Crier, called the swear words of override or debt exclusion.
Right. The town's been lucky that they haven't had to do that. There was 5 years ago when this was coming up, there was great planning done by the Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen, Zach Taylor, the town accountant, then Finance Director now, and everybody else that
right, because what you heard for 5 years was we have to put as much money away as stabilization because the Woodland bond is coming. Yep. And that'll take care of it. Now, in reality, what the Finance Committee discussed in its May 11th meeting was basically you're not going to have to pull as much out of stabilization as originally figured 5 years ago because things have turned out actually better.
Right.
So stabilization might only drop until, well, actually the figure Mark Shane, the chairman, get with stabilization 5 years from now will actually be higher than it is now.
Yes.
Even though you're withdrawing to pay for the bond.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we were lucky that over the past couple of years we've been putting a transfer in of about $3 million in, and between the principal and the interest of the bonds we just got, it comes in right around that number. So you're almost just reallocating the stabilization transfer in.
So in reality, this is theoretically you could pay that entire bond off. Well, no, it's 28 million. You couldn't.
Yeah, you could put a good chunk away to it, but
but the amount of money left in stabilization after a couple of years of transfers to fund the bond, in fact, will be healthy enough that the town could do a major capital program for cash.
We could.
Depending on what the Finance Committee, town meeting, everybody else does.
Yeah, there's all that working.
Okay.
Probably wouldn't advise doing that because we don't know, what's going to happen in 5 years. But
now I know this has played almost. You've been with Milford just about a year, I guess, in August.
Yeah.
This has been a huge part of your tenure.
Yeah.
What does the treasurer do day to day when you're not gearing up for a $28 million bond issue?
Sure. So my office is responsible for obviously cash management. We take in all the cash or all the monies that the town departments are taking in, and we put them to the various banks that they belong to.
So this is everything from property taxes, auto excise taxes, if I take out a building permit, the fee.
Yep, the taxes go to the tax collector first, but then ultimately they come into the treasurer's possession. Your building fees, all the liquor license that come in.
Liquor license fees, Board of Health permit fees.
Yep.
All that stuff eventually gets funneled up through your office. Okay.
So we manage that.
How much money is that like a fiscal year that the town takes in?
Probably about between 25 and 30 million
Okay.
In revenues. That's not including the state aid.
Right, and then state aid.
You put the state aid in, and
Right.
you know, you're a lot higher than that. You know, we took in just the other day. We took in the 28 million.
Right.
So it made the balances in the banks go higher, obviously.
Now, are we actually banking that money until we pay it out?
Yep.
So you're earning interest on it?
Yep. It's currently in a money market account, and as we get our bills in, we'll transfer it into our AP and operating account, and we'll
pay it.
We'll pay it off.
Right.
My office is responsible for payroll for the entire town.
Right.
So that's a good chunk of the week, is getting the town's payroll done.
And then also paying all the bills.
Right, and then the accounts payables is the next portion, as well as managing the debt. You know, the 28 million is just one of several debt payments we have to
Right.
manage. There's usually one or two every month that comes due, so we're constantly watching that, because it's very important that we don't miss the payment date. If we miss the payment date, it's going to hurt the credit rating.
Just like if
So-
we skip a credit card payment,
Right.
or whatever.
So that's usually the day-to-day operations. We do a lot with the school payroll too. It's all run through our office. We don't data enter it, but it's all run through my office and then sent out from there.
Right, but they pay their own bills, correct?
Nope, they run them through our office as well.
Oh, okay, so
Yep.
you're really taking in all the money and paying all the bills
Yep,
for all the town departments?
That's right.
Wow.
So, yeah,
And you do that with how many people?
we have three. I have myself, an assistant treasurer, and a clerk.
That's incredible.
Yep. So,
And you're talking millions and millions of transactions.
yep. You know, payrolls usually between 500,000 and $1 million, $1.5 million when we have the school biweekly payroll come in, and AP can be the same. It could be as little as a couple 100,000. It could be as much as, just the other day it was 10 million, because we had an MSBA payment going out, as well as a short-term band payment going out. So it's important that we are watching like our cash flow, so we make sure
That was my next question. You have to
that
make
we
sure
have.
there's always enough money there. So you may have to pay out X amount this week and
Mhm.
Y amount the next week. It's
Yep.
never the same every week.
Nope, it's never the same. It's always changing.
And all that has to be within what's budgeted at the beginning of the fiscal year.
That's right. Yeah. So it's right now we're working on the budgets. We just finished actually the budgets, so that took out probably a lot of my time in April, was getting my budget done and then helping out the accounting department with that. You know, town meetings next, so that's what we're focusing on this
Right.
week and early next week, and then we'll slow down for a little bit, and year end comes, and
Then
we
you have to close out the,
close out the
because
year.
the fiscal year ends on June 30th, not
Yeah.
December 31st.
Right.
And do you deal a lot with the federal fiscal year, which runs October 1st to September 30th?
No, not so much. We have, the only thing we really do with that is our 941 payroll tax. That's done every quarter.
Okay.
So that will be coming up in June. We've already done April.
It
so.
seems like an awful lot to balance.
Yeah, it's you have to manage your time. Myself, I have to manage my time and try to focus on what's important, and that's why I rely on my assistant and my clerk a lot, because they're actually doing a lot of the day-to-day data entering, and which frees up my time to focus on other stuff that's probably a little bit more important that they're getting into.
Right.
You know, and we have a lot of state documents and state guidelines we have to fulfill at the end of the fiscal year, so that's what we'll be focusing on, and you know, that will wrap us right into October town meeting, which will lead us to year end in December for all our W-2s and 1099s, and
So it's a never-ending process.
right, and then our annual audits in February. So it's just kind of a big circle that we go through.
Well, speaking of the annual audit, when is that coming due? Last fiscal year's
Yep.
annual audit was done then this February.
Yep.
So when does that report come out, over the summer?
Yeah, probably July. I think last year it came out right when I started. It was the beginning of August. So we're probably looking at July, beginning of August again.
Okay, it's a never-ending process. It just
Right.
keeps going every year.
Yep. So that's.
Does
that's
it get
what
boring, or is there enough variety to keep you going?
No, there's enough. There's something new every day. So it's interesting. And another part that we do when we have some spare time is tax title. We have to monitor that, and we work with Jerry Moody, our town council.
Okay, now tax title is if I don't pay my property taxes for a certain number of years,
Yep.
and I'm being very non-responsive, at some point the town steps in and says, hey, we're going to take the property
Yep.
for the taxes.
It's quite a long process for that to happen. Fortunately, the town is in good financial shape. That
And doesn't the town have something like a 98% tax collection rate,
yeah,
which is pretty good?
which is really good. We don't have much in tax title. If you look at some of the surrounding towns, they probably do a lot more with tax title than we're doing because we're not really in a financial strap. For us to go in foreclose on a property, we're talking probably 6 months to a year before anything happens because we have to go to land court. And then still after that, the homeowner has a chance to pay it off before we'll.
Right, because that's seen as like a really drastic step.
Yeah, we
least
try not to do it.
courts, yeah.
We're not out to do any of
I know.
that. So
No, and you don't want to be in the land business either.
no, that's the least that we want to do. So
Right. Okay. So in terms of the school bond, though, we got an excellent rating.
Yep.
We actually got $1.5 million net. I hate to call it profit premium.
Yep.
It's an interesting concept because I've never seen like mortgage companies offering to pay me money for
Yep.
having my mortgage.
Well, yeah, you won't see a mortgage company do that. The reason why we got such a high premium is because the interest rates that are going to go back to an investor. So myself or
Or
you.
a lot of people, this is what they buy for retirement. They'll
Right.
buy municipal bonds
Right,
because they know they're guaranteed to get the payment,
right,
as opposed to the fluctuation in the stock market.
right. So it's more stable than the stock market. So an investor will pay a little bit more up front to gain that extra interest.
Right, because
rate.
they're going to turn around and sell it to people on the street
Yep.
by saying you get a guaranteed interest rate of X
Yep.
percent, on
Right.
this.
And nowadays, the interest rates of putting in a savings account is
Nothing.
nothing. So that's where everybody is looking, is the municipal bonds.
Yeah, I'm amazed. I attend a meeting of a volunteer group in my town once a month, and they have a $10,000 CD, and they announce the treasurer announces the interest every month, and it's so pitiful. It's not
Yeah.
even like $20.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, surely there ought to be enough money on $20.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I mean on $10,000 to earn more than that.
We have a few CDs. The town has a few CDs, and the interest rates are probably about 0.65%. Not much more. Some of them are 0.5. So
Okay. So in terms of paying off Woodland, you're going to be paying off that $17 million temporary bond anticipation
Mhm.
note. Then there are some, basically when the town gets the final bills for Woodland, the difference between what the state's paying, and what the town actually owes.
Yep.
That goes to pay that off, the
Yep.
bond, and then some money comes out of stabilization to make up the gap.
Yep, there's going to be a little bit of a gap.
Yeah,
Not
2-3
much,
million,
but
whatever
yeah.
it is. And then the town won't, other than the long-term payments on that bond, the town's done paying for Woodland.
Right.
I mean, you just over the next 20 years will pay off that long-term
Yep.
note, just like a home mortgage.
Right, and I think the bonds that we have, I think after 10 years or 10 or 12 years, it's callable. So at that point, if the town really wanted to, we could pay the entire thing off, the remaining
It's
off.
callable by who, the town?
Yep.
Okay.
So-
And callable means you can say, I'm paying the whole thing off.
Yeah, we won't basically continue the bond or the loan.
Right. Now, are there opportunities at some point to refinance bonds if the interest rates get better?
There are usually about 8 to 10 years in on a 20-year bond. If it's 30 years, probably a little bit more. The rates we have now, we probably won't do a refinance unless the interest rates come down significantly.
Right.
So we weren't even looking at that when we picked the top bidder that we picked.
Okay. I know your predecessor, Barbara Ogier, did that a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Renegotiated a whole bunch of bonds and saved the town a lot of money on the
Right.
on the borrowing costs.
Yep.
Okay. To me, it's a very interesting thing because the average person doesn't deal with the multi-million-dollar borrowings and go through all this process.
Right.
I've tried to use the analogy of a home mortgage because I think that's the closest anybody ever gets to borrowing a large amount of money in their life. I remember when I sold my first house, there was a day between closing on the second house, and I had the profit check in my hand for one day. It was like $30,000. It was more money than I ever held in my life.
Yeah.
And you just go, wow.
Yeah.
But you're dealing, 10
it's
times that.
certainly the largest loan that I've had to deal with in my professional career. It's probably going to be the largest I've had to deal with, and it's very interesting and it's very exciting to a financial person or an accountant to see how everything works and how.
Well, Moody's kind of validated that, didn't they? I mean, Moody's called out certain things in their report. I mean, do you want to go over some of them that they called out in the report, like what made Milford worth paying a premium?
Sure. So.
I know you got the report there in front of you.
I have it. Our AA2 rating reflects a sizable tax base, stable financial position with healthy reserves, and a manageable debt and pension liability. That's one of their comments. They said our credit strengths were stable operating history with healthy reserves and a sizable tax base. Their outlook, they usually don't do an outlook for municipalities, but they said factors that could lead to an upgrade would be an increase in the tax base or demographic profile, a reduce in the debt burden, and a continued growth in reserves. So 2 out of the 3 we really can control.
Growth in reserves.
Yep. The
reducing the amount of debt
and increasing the reserves we can control. The tax base and the demographic profile is,
well,
it is what it is.
You do have a healthy tax base in Milford compared to surrounding towns.
Right. They also talked about a little bit, they went into kind of how our operations are, and the first 2 sentences were that we have an operation that will remain sound over the medium term of management's tight budgetary control and ability to maintain the reserve levels throughout the Commonwealth. It's mediums. So right now we're above what all other towns are doing. We experienced more than 6 consecutive years of operating surplus, and they attributed that to helping the reserves, and then which could partially be drawn down over the near term to help fund capital projects. They also talked about, they were very impressed that each department heads worked to keep their budgets under control, which gave us the surpluses and which obviously helped us get a great rating. So it's not just, you look at it like the accountant, the treasurer, and finance committee doing it. It's
so they said like the police department, the fire department, the library, the cemetery, the
public properties, everybody.
Everybody did their part.
Keeping everything down within their budget and even coming in lower than their budget gives us, a strong rating.
That's fantastic.
So.